Hi there, it's November the 14th and we continue our progress through the prophecies of Ezekiel, in Hebrew Ezekiel, meaning God will strengthen, and we come to chapters 29 and 30. Ezekiel is continuing his words towards Egypt in these two chapters, and particularly at the beginning of chapter 29 he brings an oracle against Pharaoh Hophrah. And Hophrah is the Pharaoh who actually had deposed King Jehoiakim and put King Zedekiah in his place and changed them over. And God is speaking against Egypt, particularly against the Pharaoh, because the Pharaoh sees himself as divine, is another one of these rulers who believes his divinity. The Egyptian Pharaoh said that they had been the creators of the Nile, the ones who had made the river Nile. And God is angry at this because obviously he is the creator of the Nile. So he depicts through Ezekiel Pharaoh being dragged up out of the Nile like a Nile crocodile, with all the fish clinging to him as well, and just being left to be eaten by the birds of the air and to be eaten up by the animals. He's going to overcome this proud and arrogant Pharaoh who has been such a trouble to Israel. But actually, strangely enough, Israel has leaned for support on Egypt against the Babylonians. There's been this political situation going on. And Ezekiel says that Egypt has been no help at all. It's been like leaning on reeds, and as they've leaned on the reeds have gone through their hand. So there's been a terrible bite back, a terrible price to pay for the support that they've looked to Egypt for. And he says that Egypt is going to collapse, and that the Nile is not Pharaoh's, but the Nile belongs to God. And that Egypt is going to be laid waste for a whole generation, for 40 years it says here, which is really a generation. But it says there is going to be a restoration of Egypt after a generation. And then there's a really interesting part at the end of chapter 29. It talks about Egypt is going to be given to Nebuchadnezzar as a reward for his not having captured Tyre. Now, in the last couple of chapters, we've read about Tyre, and we've read about the promise that Tyre would be destroyed. But it's interesting, Ezekiel here is saying that Nebuchadnezzar didn't destroy Tyre. He actually besieged Tyre and maybe left someone there to force it into tribute, but the prophesied destruction didn't come to pass, not until the time of Alexander the Great. And so the Lord says through Ezekiel that because of this, the Lord is now going to give Egypt as a reward to Nebuchadnezzar, who is going to come in and is going to sweep through Egypt. But there's a little word at the end here that Israel, having been so harried by Babylon and Egypt together, will actually re-emerge, and a horn will come forth. The horn speaks of a new shoot, a new growth, which is going to be a new Davidic monarch, the Messiah who is promised, who they are looking for. And then in chapter 30, the word continues concerning Egypt, where God tells him to howl because the day of the Lord, the day of cloud, is near. And Egypt and its allies, including Ethiopia and possibly Libya, in fact all of that North African area, are going to be invaded by Babylon. Babylon, this great empire from the east and the north, is going to come in, and those who were allied with Egypt are also going to fall. There are going to be naval vessels coming. There's going to be naval warfare coming against these North African areas, and there's going to be a stop. Nebuchadnezzar, it says, is going to put a stop to Egypt's power in the region. And God is going to also obliterate the dung gods, and he's going to obliterate these non-gods who Egypt worships. And there's a mention here of a number of different cities in Egypt, including Memphis, that was a great centre of pagan worship in Egyptian times. But also there's a mention of Tahpanhes, and Tahpanhes is the city to which the Israelite people retreated, or they fled from Israel. And we remember back to Jeremiah, how Jeremiah said don't go down to Egypt, but they actually went to Tahpanhes, and Jeremiah said, he prophesied in Tahpanhes, because he'd been taken there, he prophesied that Nebuchadnezzar would set up his throne on the stones of the pavement on the temple there where the Egyptian gods were worshipped. And so Ezekiel also prophesies that Tahpanhes, as well as Memphis, as well as other cities in Egypt, are going to be overrun by the Babylonians. And the Lord will break Pharaoh's arm. It says he's going to break his sword arm, but he's going to strengthen Nebuchadnezzar's arm. And so there's going to be this power coming in, and Pharaoh Hophrah's power is going to wane. And it says right at the end, so that you will know that I am the Lord. And that's why perhaps Ezekiel is saying this up ahead of time, to let these nations realize they're not in charge of their own destiny. This is the Lord's plan for the earth. The Lord's plan for the earth is actually to establish, to chasten Israel, but to re-establish Israel. He's moving things into place so that he can achieve his purpose of Israel being re-established. We see here God's moving through history in very draconian ways, it seems, but he will have his purpose. And the purpose of the Lord at the end of the day, as he declares in other places, is that his glory will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. We are the carriers of his glory today. And whatever is going on around us in terms of the political upheavals and the political machinations that we see going on, the Lord still has the same intention, that one day his glory will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. Have a very good November 14th.